Okay, so thank you for joining me again for Honeybee Frequently Asked Questions, session number 4. So there are 3 prior videos where we answer a lot of questions. All the questions that I'm going to answer are going to be listed down in the video description so you can see if I'm going to cover something that's of interest to you. This is designed for beginning beekeepers, so if you're an advanced beekeeper, there probably won't be anything exciting here that gets covered today. So welcome to those of you who are new and still learning and have seen my other videos and are still with me. That's great. Thanks a lot. If you notice in the opening, we have 25 degrees today. Snow's still flying. I have a squirrel eating out of my squirrel-proof feeder and then hanging out in the tree and mocking me. So we're going to move right along. Thank goodness we have a nice warm space here where we can talk about bees and hopefully share some information that's beneficial. Now, these are the questions that were submitted. If you have questions about bees that are not covered in the other sessions that we've done, please write them in the comment section below this video and we'll look at those, and I'll start building my list again for the next Honeybee Frequently Asked Questions video. So the first one is from Francis Moore. Do I worry about hot bees from Texas? So this actually comes up quite often. In fact, even in my bee club, there was a guy recently that asked me about the bees that I use and where I get them. And I'm using the bee weaver family bees from Texas, and historically people have been concerned about bees coming out of Texas because of course there are African bees there and the African genetics are there. So the risk is of course that Africanized bees might be coming out of Texas. And so do I worry about it? Well, I think that the weaver family has that pretty well under control. They do have Africanized bees in their genetic line, but they are also breeding with German black bees, Italians, and Caucasians. So, but I am vigilant. In other words, when I get a bee, I usually buy in queens from them because they live too far for me to ship actual packaged bees or nucleus colonies. So when I get those queens, I'm very aware of their behavior, and if the attitude of that colony of bees is very hot. It's been my experience recently that the most defensive bees that are attacking things are actually coming out of Florida and not Texas. I think it's on the shoulders of the breeders to make sure that they're not shipping out hot stock, that they're not working with genetics that put people and livestock at risk. And we did a video earlier last year that dealt with a family in my area that actually had bees brought up from Florida, and there was a shift in those bees and they started to attack their livestock and the beekeepers. So it was kind of a tough situation. No matter where you get your bees from, you always want to be aware of seasonal behavior of the colony as well as the overall colony disposition, and depending on where you're located, that's going to become a big issue because you do not want bees that are overly defensive that start to act like Africanized bees. They're a threat to people, they're a threat to livestock, and you just don't want to have any incidents around. So it's not that I'm worried about my stock specifically because of the genetic history of the bees that I'm working with, because they've derived Varroa resistant hygienic traits from bees through their genetic continuation through the years. And I did notice that 8 or 9 years ago when I was getting bees from that family, occasionally I would get a hot colony, but that hasn't happened for years now. So genetically they have been modifying and improving those bees, and currently I've had no problems with any of the stock that I get from Texas. But no matter where you get your bees come, if you're bringing them in, or if you get a feral colony, or if you get a swarm, always be aware of their disposition and be prepared to deal with them. You might just have to remove the queen and requeen. I know the weaver family, if they ship you a queen and she turns out to be hot, you'll know that 30 days after you've installed her. Then of course you let them know and they will replace the queen, of course, and you can just get rid of the one that you have. By the way, if you have to kill off the queen, don't just throw the queen away. Get a little vial like a test tube or a little plastic bottle like an eyedropper bottle, and you put that queen in there with alcohol, and then you let the alcohol evaporate down and crush up that queen. And now you've got a queen lure so that you can capture swarms. So even the queen that you have to get rid of is not wasted. But no, I'm not terribly worried, but I am constantly aware of what my bees are doing and what their behavior is like. So also you could look up Marla Spivak. Marla Spivak is spelled S-P-I-V-A-K. She did a great YouTube seminar where she discussed hygienic bees and traits and behaviors, and how those genetics are working for us rather than against the bees. Okay, so the next question is from 6 Deep 6. Venting flow hives and upper vents. Okay, so the way the flow hive is designed, they have screen boards on the bottom and those corrugated removable boards, and the flow hive 2 has a tray in the bottom and it's got a vent in the back that you totally control by flipping it up or down, closing it off, or opening up the venting. They don't currently have a gabled roof system. If you look at the flow hives, they have the gabled topped roofs. They don't have vents built into those. There is some venting because the whole hive up there is not airtight, but you can add your own vent. So what I did was I went out to the garage and I got a front piece from the Flow-Hive 2. So the Flow-Hive 2 is the smallest one. It's a 6-frame Flow Super, which is an 8-frame Langstroth hive. Now when I'm putting vents and want to control the venting on the upper side of any beehive, sometimes I'm just making a shim for an upper access, which could also be your feeder box. Right now the Flow-Hive, this is the depth of their roof, so you can see there's no room here for a decent sized feeder really, because we need 3 inches of height or whatever. So you could put fondant or something in these, but the other thing is venting, you're going to have to do that yourself. So I would recommend that just above the O here, you drill a 3/4 inch hole, and then you're going to center this plate. I'll put a link to these plates. I buy them also on Amazon. This just happens to fit exactly the face of this Flow-Hive 2 front. Now the Flow-Hive, the 7-frame Flow-Hives, which are 10-frame Langstroth, this is even bigger, so it absolutely fits that. So I'm showing you the most critical application. So you'll install this here, and these things are pretty cool. Sometimes you see them made out of plastic. I don't care for the plastics because my hives, a lot of them are facing south. They get a lot of sun, and the plastic over time is going to degrade. These metal ones last a long time, so of course there's a screw in the middle. This would be the full open position. Then when you turn it, if you have these slats face down here, these slats are going to allow workers through. They are the same opening sizes that you have on queen excluders. So if you're putting together a nuke or something, you don't want that queen to fly out, this would allow the workers in and out and would keep the queen. So it's just like a queen excluder, only it's for the 3/4 inch hole or whatever size you decide to make it. Then if you're trying to just vent it, or if there's been robbing issues or something like that, and you want to close off a weaker colony and you still want to vent the top, this would be that setting because these are just vent holes, and then you have the option, of course, to close it off completely. So right now, to answer that question, 6 Deep 6, you have to make your own hole, and you have to be prepared to control that entry route. But by opening that up to your field bees, you are speeding their access through this. This is the inner cover for a flow hive, and you just pull that plug out, and then so they would be coming through the gable end, and they would be going down into those flow supers through that center hole. So you can control that. And then in the wintertime, you can just close this off, and that limits, of course, eliminates access up above, and then that's also, you would close off the front of this. So there you have it. I hope that answers that question. Now maybe in the future, I hope the people at the Flow-Hive group there will give us an option for maybe a taller top that would allow for feeders to be installed, like the Rapid Round, or some of the deeper, higher capacity feeders, because keep in mind where this thing was made. And where they currently use it primarily down in Australia, they're not worried about the kind of winters that we have, so they're not thinking about, you know, upper venting and wintering over and having food resources that we can control up in the top there. So you either have to make your own shim the way it is now, or maybe they'll come up with something later. So that's a good question. So now we're on to number 3. Open feed, drinker station, location, types of drinkers. Okay, I did not put down who asked that question, but the question is about, I do a lot of open feeding in my bee yard, and primarily that's because I test feeds and I study the drink that they're going to take and salinity, because we're also giving them a teaspoon of sea salts with pure filtered water. We're also testing the syrups and the different food boosters and things that they're liking and disliking, and so I use these little yellow 1-quart feeders. I could put a link. I'll put a link in the video description that shows my studies of the feed supplements and the salinity tests that I've done, and you'll see those feeders. They're 1 quart each. If I'm open feeding, the station is going to move this year. So I'm moving my station farther away from my bee yard, and it's going to be to the west. It's going to be 100 yards to the west of my apiary. And I open feed with gallon feeders like this one, which comes from Be Smart Design. Open trough here. By the way, I was looking on Amazon, and people are very unhappy with this design of a feeder, but this is, when I look at the pictures, this is actually an improved feeder. So if you're buying these open feeders, these are designed also to go into a medium super, so you can feed inside your hive and prevent robbing. But most of those complaints are from a design that's several years old, so this is the new design. The bees, this will not be full of dead bees. There are more spikes here preventing the bees from getting up under it, and there's a raised lip here that keeps the bees from coming in around the sides. And when it sits there, also there's been some, in the past there were springs in the bottom here that would lift it up, and then the bees could get in around this edge up in here, up into the tank. But you can see now that they even empty, it sits flush on the bottom there. So if these are level, these are the ones that I use for open feeding because they're a whole gallon. Now, why would I open feed? Well, as I said before, because we do testing and I want to see what honeybee preferences are. I also like to see what comes to the feeders, including the wasps and hornets that visit those feeders. And it's a great way to observe what's going on in an area where the bees are not defensive. So you can sit right there without any protection at all and just sip your tea or your coffee and watch those bees and look at their overall health. If there's even Varroa on the bees, you get a chance to sit and look at them. But it takes the pressure off of robbing. So if you've got a dearth period and the bees are really putting pressure on the colonies in your bee yard, and they're really challenging those guard bees on the landing boards, you're going to, of course, put entry reducers on those landing boards. You're going to make sure that they can defend themselves. But you can also relieve some of that foraging pressure by providing open feeding about 100 yards from your hive, from your colony and your apiary. So when you do that, they'll go there and they won't be so desperate to get into these hives. Plus, you're going to help them out in a time of dearth, other than robbing each other and killing each other off, hopefully. So that's how I open feed. I'm always kind of checking out different feeders, but mostly I'm testing the syrups that we're using, essential oils. You know, we don't even know if those essential oils are providing a health benefit for the bees, but I do like to mix them as per the manufacturer's instructions and set them all out and see what the bees are going after and what they're avoiding. So far, when we've done open feeding and we tested essential oils, the bees show an enormous preference for filtered water and 1-to-1 sugar syrup above everything else. So if we go down to nothing but essential oils with sugar syrup first for all the tankers, and then we add the essential oils in there, now we can see of all the essential oils which one they would prefer the most, and that's coming up also this spring. So open feeder types of drinkers, those, and the little entry, the yellow and black drinkers that I use are technically entry board feeders. I don't like to use entry board feeders because all the feeding is happening right at the entry of the colony, and you don't know if they're being robbed, so it could create pressure right there. I recommend that you feed through the hive top feeders, like this thing up here, or installed in medium supers, empty ones that are designed just for feeders, so that would accommodate things inside and they can get their resources. It is important, especially in the spring, because look what can happen. Your bees are going to start having brood, and they're going to have a lot of stress on the resources that they have, and if it starts raining, the foragers can't get out and they have the brood to care for. So you can at least provide the energy end of that by giving them the carbohydrates they need. Okay. So the next question from Pepper Sanchez. Queens, what's the purpose of clipping the wings on queens? Okay. When you buy in queens for your bees, sometimes they come in the package. You know, when you're ordering packaged bees from a breeder, they give you lots of options with the package. You get a 3-pound package or a 5-pound package, and then you pick the kind of queen that you want. And then they offer you marking the queen, so they'll mark the thorax. Usually it's just a paint daub, red or blue or something like that. And that's so you can spot her quickly on your brood frames. The other thing is you want to know if that queen's been superseded, if that's a different queen than the one you bought, because they can swarm and you won't even know. And of course there's a new queen in there, and unless you really know what that queen looks like, you may have a new queen and not know it. So, other than marking them for identification, you can also clip the wings. So if you clip the wings on the queen, then that means she can't fly away. Now, what does that do for the bee behavior inside the colony? First of all, when they decide to replace a queen, they're going to replace that queen whether she's marked or not. So it could work to your advantage, because a clipped queen, I currently have 2 colonies right now who have queens in them, and their wings are clipped. Now what's going to happen is, if that queen finally wears out her welcome, she's not performing well, and all the nurse bees turn on her and stop feeding her, she starts losing weight and start chasing her around the colony, and then they're going to swarm out. When she swarms, she'll try to fly. So she might fly 20 feet from the colony and plunk right down in the grass. When she does that, the swarm that goes with her are going to protect her even on the ground. So you're going to have no problem collecting that queen. So when they do swarm, and they ultimately will, because they don't just decide that the queen's worn out, that they're done with her, and they don't just kill her off, they actually drive her out of the colony and the swarm goes with her. So when that happens, if she's got clipped wings, she's not getting very far. Sometimes they just go right out of the landing board and plunk right down on the ground right in front, and you have a clump of bees on the ground in front. That's not a beard of bees that has fallen from your hive. That's actually a swarm and a queen with clipped wings trying to get away. So then you can just collect them and create a new colony. So it's actually easier for you. Now, if you use clipped queens or have good stories about that, I'd love to read about that in the video description. So if you've got some story about what a clipped winged queen did when she swarmed out, those would be interesting to read about, and I would welcome that. So thank you, that's a good question. Powdered sugar for mite control. We recently talked about the oxalic vaporizer, and we talked about that. I use Varroa resistant hygienic bees that have gone without treatment for many, many years. And this year we're going to be doing testing with the oxalic vaporizers. And somebody commented down there that, couldn't you just put powdered sugar and control the Varroa that way? Well, the way my bees control Varroa infestation in the colonies now is that they groom each other. So, and I've posted videos of this hygienic behavior, and it's almost like coming into a car wash. The foraging bees come in and they unload their nectar, they unload their pollen, whatever they do, and then they go to a little spot, and these grooming bees go all over them, and they follow their antenna, they groom their wings, they go down every foot, and they cover head to toe these worker bees. So if there's Varroa on there, they're going to get them off. So, and that's why I have these survivor line bees to begin with, is because they have this hygienic behavior that prevents Varroa from succeeding, and they don't get into those cells of open brood, and they don't get in there and reproduce when it gets capped and they're in the pupa state. So the point is they're grooming everything off before it gets that far. But if you don't have those hygienic bees and you've got straight Italians or something, could you just take powdered sugar? Look, I just happen to have a bag here. This is powdered sugar. And I think this is the kind that has some cornstarch with it. So if you see powdered sugar with cornstarch, the cornstarch is generally there to keep it from clumping, and because remember, powdered sugar is usually to be used for glazing and things like that, so it also helps make it more syrupy. Is that harmful to your bees? Probably not, because remember, you're just going to dust all of your bees with powdered sugar so that they go, powdered sugar's on me, and they start grooming it off because it's sugar. They like it. They're going to be licking each other. They're going to clean off all of their fur. And then the thought process is that the Varroa are going to lose their footing and they're going to fall off. So, and they do that. The question is, how effective is that as a method for controlling Varroa? it's actually not terribly effective. So you have to open your hive to do it. You have to expose your brood frames to do that, and that's where you're going to spread your powdered sugar over the top, and then the sugar is going to collect on the top edges of your frames, and then you're going to take a brush and brush it off of those so it goes down and onto all the bees. And then the bees are going to move the powdered sugar around, and they're going to groom off the mites. So then what happens? If you have a solid bottom board, those mites are not injured, they're just groomed off. So if they fall to the bottom board, they're just going to scoot along the bottom and go up the walls and go right back to the brood frames. They're going to find themselves a worker bee, and they're going to get back on her. So, or they're going to get into those drone cells. So the Varroa are very fast moving. So this has kind of been tested a lot as a method for getting the bees to actively groom each other. And so the sugar stimulates that. If you're trying that method, you also want an open screen bottom boards. They fall right out, go to the ground, and can't get back in the hive. And while they're down there, because they have sugar on them, the ants are going to get them. The ants are going to eat them. So the ants are going to get sugar, carbohydrates, and they're going to get protein because they're going to eat those mites. So yeah, you'll knock them off, but it won't be effective as an overall means of controlling Varroa in your colony, and that's been proven out by many studies. Randy Oliver did actual studies on sugar dusting as a method for controlling Varroa, and it was not a very strong method for that control. So check out Randy Oliver and look up Varroa control with powdered sugar, and you're going to find they have published papers on that. He actually did research. So for me, I don't think it's great. So I have survivor line bees, so it doesn't change anything that they do anyway, because they already groom each other. But if you have a line of bees that doesn't actively do hygienic things, and they don't groom each other, and they don't remove dead bees very well, then by putting powdered sugar on them, you are going to stimulate some of that behavior. But realistically, you're not going to want to put powdered sugar on your bees every week. So maybe rethink that. Okay, and then I had a note here from Kevin Wilford, who commented after we did the oxalic vaporization demonstration. We talked about the different irons and how you use them. He suggested that you might want to pull out your oxalic vaporizer iron right after it's sublimated all the crystals that are in it. And the reason is he thinks that when you put it in there and it gets hot and all the vaporizer goes away, we leave it in there 6 to 10 minutes overall so that it cools down in place, and then we uncover everything and pull it out. He thinks that the bees go down and actually attack the iron because it's foreign to the hive, and that they're actually getting burned and killed before it's completely cooled down. So you might be able to save some bees by pulling out your oxalic vaporizer right after all of the crystals have sublimated and gone into the air in there. So if you have experience with your oxalic vaporizer and you have put it in there, and some of you are pulling them out right after they've cooled down, for me that's 2 minutes and 10 seconds in. If you're pulling them out right away, do you notice that there aren't 2 or 3 dead bees on it, as compared to if you leave it in there until it cools for 6 to 10 minutes and then you pull it out? Do you notice that there are more dead bees on your iron? That's something that we're going to pay attention to, and I'm going to do both methods. We're going to pull it out after the 2 minute 10 seconds, then we're going to leave some in for the full 6 to 10 minutes. We're going to pull those out, and we're going to see what the difference is. But if you have experience with that, please share it down in the video comments section. It'd be very interesting, and thanks, Kevin, for that question. And then what is a fume board and what is it for? Alright, so if you've been watching my channel, and I hope you have, if you don't normally watch my channel, please subscribe and go ahead and click like on this video, and there are going to be more frequently asked questions videos like this one in the future. And hopefully as the weather breaks and it gets warm outside, we're going to go outside and actually show you live bees. I'm not just going to sit here in the warmth and comfort of the studio here and just talk about it. But the fume board is, I use Flow-Hives now. So when I'm taking honey off, it's out of flow frames, so I don't need a fume board because I'm not pulling the frames out to extract honey. I'm just opening up the backs, draining it off, and collecting it. If you're interested in the Flow-Hive, I'll leave a link in the video description so you can read more about those if it's new to you. And also, if you use that link, you can actually get $50 off if you buy something from that company. And then I get $50 to buy more stuff for myself. But let's say we're traditionalists. Let's say that we've got honey supers with standard frames, and you're inspecting, you say, well, it's full of honey and it's ready to be uncapped and now I can start my extraction process. So you go out there and you look at the frames and they're ready to go. Now you have to get your bees off of the frames. And it's a pain for some people. So they pull up the frames one by one and they inspect, of course, to see that it's all capped and it's all ready and there's no brood on that frame. And then you're going to take your brush and you're going to sweep off your bees. And then you're going to put that frame in some holder that you've got, hopefully that's covered, because you're going to have to get those frames back to your honey parlor and you're going to do your uncapping and filtering and everything. You're going to spin it out. So getting the bees off easier is, oh look, I just happen to have this. Honey Bee Gone the natural way. This is a scent that's not harmful to bees, but they don't like the smell of it, so they're going to abandon it. So this, from back when I was taking honey the old way, this is a fume board. So what you do is you're going to take your telescoping cover off of your beehive, then you're going to take the inner cover off, and then you're going to inspect, and this is where you want to get the bees to leave the honey super. So this takes the place of your hive cover. And it has a nice cottony fabric texture on the inside here. And you're going to take something like this Honey Bee Gone, by the way, which is made by honeybeegone.com. So then you would spray this board, spray that fabric, and then you're going to make sure that there's nice strong smell there, and then you're going to take this and you're going to put it on top of your beehive, and then you're going to leave it there for 3 to 5 minutes. And you're going to want to do this on a warm day. You shouldn't be extracting honey anyway if it's a cold day, because the honey's not going to run and it's going to be a lot of extra work for you. It doesn't extract as fast, it doesn't drain as fast, doesn't filter as fast, and you can't bottle it as fast. So on a nice hot day, this works even better. So then you leave that on there, and just like the oxalic vaporizer irons, I recommend, I have 3 or 4 of these, and the reason is that when I used to take honey off that way, I would get this going and put it on one colony, then I would go to the next colony, pull the cover off, pull the inner cover off, look at the frames that I want, and if that super was full and ready to harvest, then I would take another one of these and put it on that one, spray it, put it on, go to the next one. By the time you've put the 3rd or 4th one on the 3rd or 4th colony that you're going to harvest from, you come back and the first one's ready to go. Then you take it off, and magically all your bees have revolted and they've gone down into the lower boxes. So now you have a frame that's void of bees. You don't have to blow them off, you don't have to brush them off, you just pull the whole thing and put it in your cart or whatever else you have, hopefully that's covered, so you don't have bees following you back. It also results in fewer dead bees. It's less hassle. You still should smoke your colony whenever you're going in there, but that's it. That's what a fume board is for. So those are the questions that I have for this time. If you have other questions regarding beginning with honeybees and you want to know more, you want to see something, please write it down below in the comment section of this video, and I'm more than happy to talk with you about it. And I'm really pleased with the number of questions that are coming in and the interest that we have in beginning with bees. This is going to, of course, probably run out, because in the spring, when I can finally get outside and start working with the bees, I'm going to be spending less time inside. But I'm also happy to talk about products, beekeeping equipment, any bee practices, or theory about beekeeping. So thanks again for watching, and I hope you have a great weekend.